Seems like we're all kind of drawn to the mysterious, vast ocean, right? Endless adventures, mountains of treasure, mermaids in the deepets, the stuff that fires up daydreams. Whether you're young or just young at heart, makes you feel like you're part of some epic, dazzling quest. Welcome to the short fantasy adventure novel, Asterisk Prince, or Pirate Asterisk, written by Changling Xinye, narrated by Mr.deeeeer, brought to you by Kidian Chinese Network Andraindeer Studio. Chapter 1, Prince or Pirate?
The muggy summer breeze from the Arabian Sea sweeps over the Indian subcontinent. The long monsoon season is about to begin. Late May air hangs thick and damp, heavy with the cloying sweetness of overripe tropical fruit, like a drowsy cat curling around old Goa, cradling this sleepy paradise. Thunder rumbles closer from the sea, storm clouds stacking up against the dark sky. The first raindrop plummets toward the glittering, lantern-lit city below. It picks up speed, finally landing in the upturned palm of a begging hand. Rain. The owner of the grimy hand pulls back, tightening the ragged red sari around her, and rises from the low wall she had been leaning against. Flickering light catches in her gray-green eyes. She turns and slips into an alley, covering her face as she hurries deeper into the shadows. A small piece of hardtack tumbles from the clay bowl she carries, hits the ground, and is immediately snatched by a rat waiting by a puddle. It dashes away from competing rats, bursts out of the alley, and plunges into the dazzling, noisy bustle of the city. Shaking off its hungry pursuers, it races down broad streets, dodging hooves, spinning wheels, and the hurried steps of palanquin bearers sparking shrieks from ladies and noble women, then veers into another dark, muddy passage under chasing servants' blows. There, it escapes a striped cat and slips into a familiar drain. Following the gutter, it weaves past pickpockets haggling over loot, avoids two brawling sex workers, crawls over the foot of a drunken sailor vomiting against a wall, and finally scrambles through a palm-sized iron window. The noise cuts off abruptly, shut out by an invisible barrier. He sits amid foul-smelling straw, swarming with flies, looking up as a large gray rat carrying food drops through the prison window. Unafraid, it scurries toward him, trying to climb onto his cross-legged knees. He shifts to shoo it away, his shackles clanking dully. Suddenly, the iron door grates open behind him. Someone's here, more than one. Turn around. The guard's command slurs. He's been drinking. Not wanting trouble, he complies. He freezes for a second when he sees the priest. The boozy guard clears his throat, straightens up, and loudly recites a string of the king's titles. Finally pausing for breath, he announces, "In the name of the great Philip IV, the Portuguese Viceroy of Goa and the Goa Inquisition find you guilty. Sentence: hanging. Tomorrow. The Holy Order priest will give you last rites." The guard slurs again, as if the proclamation drained him. It's Sunday. "The brothers even brought you some extra food," he emphasizes. "Your last supper." The guard steps aside, gesturing to the priest. "You may begin." The priest nods, lifting his Bible toward the shackled prisoner on the floor. "Your name?" "Yusuf bin Hassan." He looks up, meets the priest's eyes, and grins with a wink. The smile cuts through the cell gloom. He's just a boy, with deep brown skin and bright black eyes. "Yusuf, how old are you?" 17. Yusuf's gaze shifts behind the priest, where two hooded brothers from the Holy Order stand in tall, one short. They accompany the condemned to the end and bury them after. tradition keeps their identities secret. The tall one offers Yusuf some bread, salted meat, and a quarter quart of wine in a small keg. Yusuf notices his entire hand is covered thick, pale calluses. Yusuf, what crime did you commit? I am innocent. The guard's boot kicks out instantly, knocking Yusuf into the filthy straw. He follows with 2 blows from his rifle butt, fueled by drunken rage. Tell the truth. No repentance now, and hell awaits you tomorrow. The young prisoner seems used to such beatings. He doesn't beg or cry out, just expertly curls up, arms shielding his head, taking hits where it matters least. The priest adjusts his gold wire pince-nez. Tell the truth, Yusuf. Fine, ill talk, comes the muffled reply from within his arms. The guard kicks him once more spitefully and shuffles aside, his face flushed red with alcohol. Yusuf slowly pushes himself up. He feels blood dripping from his nose, but just wipes it casually with his shackled hands. I admit, he says, turning a defiant grin toward the guard, I am the one who exposed the viceroy for selling titles, called him a murderer, revealed his dealings with pirates, and wrecked their slave trade. Still arrogant till the end. The guard lunges again, kicking Yusuf in the back, cutting him off. You damned pirate lord. Traitor, apostate. Hanging's too good for you, you deserve to burn. The drunk soldier's blows grow fiercer. Yusuf gradually falls silent. The shorter brother behind the priest steps forward to intervene, but is held back by his companion. Only when exhausted does the guard stagger back, leaving Yusuf barely breathing on the ground. Can you hear me, Yusuf? Yeah. At the priest's calm voice, he rolls onto his back, staring at the low ceiling where the rat now peers down from a beam. Go on. I heard them call you Geronimo. Not my real name. He licks his split lip tastes like iron. The Portuguese forced it on me. Your father was the Sultan of Mombasa? Yes. Your family? Yusuf is silent for a moment, then exhales. Dead. You're accused of apostasy and piracy. The priest's glasses gleam in the lamplight. A prince destined to be sultan became a wanted pirate. Why? For freedom.
Chapter 2. Sultan or Traitor 1.
Mombasa is one of the oldest port cities on East Africa's coast. Over 800 years ago, Arab and Persian merchants were already sailing here on dhows to trade. It's this gorgeous tropical city with a perfect natural harbor, soft white sandy beaches, and shady coconut and palm trees everywhere. Yusuf lived here with his family until he was 7. He was the favorite son of Sultan Hassan of Mombasa, with both Moorish and Swahili blood in him. Even as a little kid, Yusuf was full of energy and curiosity. The nannies watching him couldn't keep up with the little rascal B6. He'd already explored every beach in Mombasa. He'd even sneak onto boats and go out fishing with the fishermen, watching them hunt whales with harpoons and ropes made from coconut fiber. The fishermen were happy to bring along the lively little prince. They taught him to dive deep like pearl divers, and anyone seeing him swim so smoothly in the water might have thought he was some sleek little sea creature. If there was anywhere in Mombasa he hadn't explored, it was Fort Jesus, looming on the southeast corner of the island. A few years before Yusuf was born, the Portuguese showed up in their ironclad carracks and built this fortress out of stone. Even though it stood on Swahili land, no Swahili was allowed in without Portuguese permission. Rumor had it the last unlucky guy who got caught still dragged his broken leg around, begging on the streets every day. Exploring Fort Jesus had been on Yusuf's mind for ages. Despite endless warnings from his nannies and family, the idea kept burning secretly inside him, like embers under ashes. Finding that water channel was pure luck, Yusuf had no idea where it led, but he followed a scuttling crab and found himself in a dark, dripping cave. Wind blowing from above meant there was an exit up there. Yusuf touched the stone wall, his fingers feeling the slippery moss. A centipede scurried over his hand, and he yelped. The cave echoed with what sounded like countless startled boys. Rrrr. Once his eyes adjusted, he saw a faint light reflecting on the water. He waded into waist-deep water, sharp stones and shells crunching underfoot. Kicking away some seaweed trying to snag his ankle, he felt a neatly cut stone brick under his foot. He brought his other foot over, and with his hands helping to dig, steps covered in mud emerged, leading up toward the cool breeze. At first, he could walk upright, but as the steps got steeper, he had to use his hands too, almost crawling up the staircase. When he finally climbed out of the cave into blinding light, he realized he was on a windy cliff, the steps beneath him nearly vertical. Surprised seagulls circled around the suddenly appearing boy, the cliffs on both sides dotted with their nests for laying eggs and raising chicks. Looking up, the thick stone walls of Fort Jesus loomed overhead. Yusuf carefully avoided bird droppings that could fall any second, slowly climbing higher until he slipped into the castle through a drainage hole just wide enough for one person, the castle he'd always dreamed of. Luckily, no one spotted him. There were few Portuguese guarding the fort, never more than 200 at most. But even with just over 100 soldiers, the king far away on the other side of the world kept a tight grip on Mombasa's real power. Yusuf would only understand this years later. Right now, he was just a little boy completely absorbed in his long-awaited adventure. Fort Jesus was famous for being built in the shape of a lying person. Dozens of German-made bronze cannons were mounted on its head facing the sea to guard against Turkish fleet attacks. Thick defenses on the walls could withstand any naval artillery at the time. Yusuf found himself in an ammunition storage room. Looking up from the window, he could see cannon barrels pointing toward the sea. Faint voices mixed with the sea wind, probably soldiers on duty. Yusuf heard the dull thud of their high leather boots on the stone bricks and cautiously chose a drainage ditch hidden under vines and shade, moving like a cat. The fort's buildings varied in height, with top-level drains leading to lower roofs. A maze of channels, passages, and arches connected the castle's buildings, almost like they formed one giant human-shaped life form. This massive thing totally lived up to everything Yusuf had imagined. He ran crouched along wall ridges, hopping over railings, jumping out one window and into another hut, weaving through buildings with red tile, thatch, or coconut leaf roofs. He knew he was leaving the heavily armed head of the castle, heading toward the heart where tall red-tiled towers stood. Yusuf lost track of how long he'd been running, only that his legs were exhausted by the time he reached the tallest tower. Leaning against the rough, sand-walled surface, he caught his breath while looking down at the fort. Further north was the Sultan's palace where he lived with his family, its delicate white buildings dotted with green coconut trees and little gardens. And right then, he actually saw his father.
Chapter 3. Sultan or Traitor 2.
Yusuf would never mistake his father's turban and white robe. He was walking with some Portuguese, entering the fortress through the iron gate at the northwest end. What's Dad doing here? Yusuf's mind raced. His father had never mentioned his time at Fort Jesus. Before bringing it up, only ever led to gloomy silence. They had already passed through the second arch and were heading this way. Looked like they were coming into the big building right below. Yusuf slid down the roof tiles, hung halfway off the eaves, and hooked into a vent below like an agile colobus monkey swinging inside. The vent was full of dust the moment he moved. It clouded the whole passage, making it hard to see or breathe. After crawling through that rough stretch, a spacious, high-ceilinged reception hall opened up before him. He grabbed onto a mahogany beam near the vent and started moving toward the center. The heavy wooden door slowly creaked open. Yusuf held his breath, tucked against the beam. Next to him hung a huge two-tier black iron chandelier, its edges crusted with hardened white wax. His father was led under the light by several Portuguese, facing an officer who'd clearly been waiting. The man had brown curly hair, a broad face, and looked to be in his 30s. His skin was a shade darker than the others, and his eyes were deeper in color. Yusuf searched his memory and came up with a Pedro de Mello, the new commander of Fort Jesus, a man not known for smiling. "You were supposed to be here yesterday." Yusuf could hear the displeasure in the commander's tone. "I suspect if I hadn't sent soldiers, you wouldn't have come at all." "One of our trade ships was sunk by your people. Took time to tend to the wounded and handle the cargo." His father's voice held back anger. "I planned to settle that first before coming to demand answers." Pedro responded flatly. "By decree, any ship sailing the Indian Ocean without permission from the Portuguese government is subject to seizure or sinking." We had a pass. Yusuf could almost feel his father's clenched jaw. The captain showed the document, but your patrol accused us of forgery without even providing proof. In Mombasa, we are the government. Pedro glanced up at the chandelier, not noticing Yusuf hiding above. Our judgment is the government's ruling. His father stepped forward. Pedro stepped forward too, slowly forcing him back. As for the ruling on the forged pass, I'll write separately to the governor in Goa to explain. Pedro stood stiffly, a sign of his military training. This afternoon, well, take custody of the personnel and cargo you've secured. They're free people. You have no right. Our laws protect free people and their property, not smugglers and pirates. His father lunged toward the commander, but the men beside him pulled him back under the light, keeping him at a distance from Pedro. I can find many witnesses. The crew are honest, free civilians. Free men on a smuggling ship, that makes them pirates. Pedro tapped the hilt of his sword rhythmically, not looking at Yusuf's father. Compared to the gallows, being sold into slavery is a mercy. He paused, maybe to gauge his father's reaction. Goa is expanding its docks and cathedral. Cochin, Macau, Nagasaki, all their Misericordia chapels need repairs. And the new spice plantations in Ceylon require a large workforce. These are urgent issues mentioned in the governor's letters. We've discussed this. We've discussed it, his father said firmly. Mombasa sells no slaves to you. Maybe out of disappointment, maybe fatigue, the commander sighed. I've given you suggestions. The Mwana tribe up north, aren't they your sworn enemies? He stepped closer suddenly, staring into his father's eyes. I've been to other parts of Africa. Selling captives from tribal conflicts is common. His father held the gaze without backing down. We are not savages. Sultan Hassan, I respect your integrity and courage. Pedro wore that same unreadable expression, not happy, not angry. But I must also remind you, in all matters, the interests of the Portuguese government come first. The Sultan didn't answer. The air in the hall grew heavy and tense, as if countless invisible blocks of iron were pressing down from above.
Chapter 4. Sultan or Traitor 3.
Yusuf gulped, feeling weirdly tense out of nowhere. That rustling sound in his ears caught his attention. He turned to see where it was coming from, and his eyes went wide at what he saw. The heavy black iron lamp bracket had broken loose and was falling fast, dragging its chain down with it faster and faster. Yusuf tried to grab the chainway too far to reach. In a panic, he lunged forward and caught the swinging chain midair like it was some black snake. But his small body couldn't stop the lamp's fall. Instead, it pulled him up toward the ceiling. "Dad, look out!" he yelled. The kid's shout startled everyone below. The Sultan sidestepped just as the heavy chandelier smashed right where He had been standing, sending dust flying everywhere. The pulling force on the chain suddenly stopped. Yusuf lost his grip and fell. He braced himself for a hard, cold landing, eyes squeezed shut. The falling feeling vanished, but the crash never came. He cracked his eyes open and saw a thick black beard. He was cradled in his father's arms. Sultan Hassan stared, speechless, at his son who had just fallen from the sky. Pedro cleared his throat, covering his nose from the dust. "Your son?" He waved his men over to clean up the mess, not even pretending to be sorry. "How'd he get in?" The commander's eyes locked on Yusuf, making him shrink deeper into his dad's arms. He suddenly remembered everyone's serious warning sign, that beggar who got his legs broken. By law, anyone trespassing in Fort Jesus gets punished. "You know the rules," Pedro said sharply, his lips pressed tight like a cold metal line. Even the Sultan's son. The Sultan held his boy tightly, like he was ready to fight anyone who tried to take him. Surprisingly, the commander's expression softened. "Given your family's loyalty to Portugal all these years, I'll let it slide." He paused, then added his clever condition. "As long as His Highness agrees to provide 300 strong slaves to the colony in Goa within the next month." Yusuf glanced at his father and saw his eyes close weakly. "Next time we meet, I hope we can reach an agreement quicker," Pedro said, waving them away. Father set Yusuf down and took his hand. "Next time, I hope a chandelier doesn't almost crush my head." The Sultan walked out without stopping, his son in hand. Yusuf kept looking back, but the Portuguese commander's face gave nothing away. The whole way home, Dad was quieter than ever. Days passed, and the punishment Yusuf expected never came. His backside was safe. For now. Father left him with old servant Ode under strict watch, and went north into the highlands the next day. Yusuf bugged old Ode again and again, but the man wouldn't say what his dad was up to. Did he take people to the Moana tribe to catch slaves, he ventured, only to get a stern glare. Bored, the boy lay under a coconut tree, staring at the unripe fruit overhead. Why do the Portuguese always get their way? A new idea popped into his head. He rolled over toward Ode. "I've been inside Fort Jesus. They've got few men, we've got many." He raised his eyebrows mysteriously. "We can gather everyone and kick those bad guys out." Yusuf got a solid smack on the head. "Nonsense," Ode scolded. "It's 'cause everyone's as scared as you that we get pushed around," the boy grumbled, rubbing his head. "They have guns and cannons," Ode said quietly. "And us? We have bows and spears." A rumor spread among the Africans. The Portuguese bought them just to turn their bodies into gunpowder. Every cannon blast cost 2 African lives. After all, none of the people taken away on those ships ever came back. Yusuf remembered the arsenal he saw inside the fort. His eyes shifted. He wanted to say something but held back. Mention steel and head gets smacked again, whether on the head or the butt. While Yusuf was sulking, a sweaty, blood-stained man rushed past through the garden toward his mother. He recognized him moan of his father's attendants. he never really remembered how the rest of that day went. In his memory, the whole palace was drowned in grief, everything and everyone covered in a layer of gray sorrow. Yusuf's father, the respected Sultan of Mombasa, was returned as a headless corpse. They even threw in the king's mercy 2,000 lengths of cloth to settle the matter. During those days, Yusuf and his mother held each other, crying till the world went dark. After the Sultan's death, Pedro, the Portuguese commander of Fort Jesus, immediately became regent of Mombasa. He insisted that the Sultan's young heir should sail to India to be educated in Goa, the capital of the Eastern colonies. Leaving his home and family was painful, but it couldn't break through the numb grief that had filled Yusuf since losing his father. He drifted onto that shaky ship and swayed across the sea to a distant continent. His father's protection was gone forever. Like a newborn, scared and trembling, he was thrown nearly naked into a totally unfamiliar world.
Chapter 5. None or Wild Child One.
Goa is a port city built on the Arabian Sea. After the Portuguese seized it from the local Indian ruler, they turned it into the center of trade in the East and a base for Catholic missionary work in Asia. Flowers of all colors bloom in the city throughout the year. Between the coconut trees along the coast, there are beautiful and charming houses and magnificent mansions, as well as grand cathedrals and monasteries. Oriental Lisbon, Rome on the equator, golden Goa. Travelers and wandering poets have bestowed many beautiful names upon it, but they could never hide the dark and decaying atmosphere brought about by the accumulation of capital. In the blink of an eye, it had been 3 years since Yusuf arrived in Goa. He was sent to the renowned St. Paul's College in the Far East and was taken care of by the misericordia of the city. To be honest, except for the spicy taste of curry, the rice, butter, and fruits provided every day were not bad. They also did not allow him to wear his old clothes. The dress code of the college was a shirt and knee-length shorts. When it was cold, he could add a coat or a robe. His old name was also no longer allowed. The priest in charge of his education gave him a new name, Geronimo. Geronimo's daily schedule was very full. He had to study reading, writing, and catechism, as well as Latin, theology, and science. Since he was going to inherit the throne of Mombasa in the future, when he turned 10, his schedule would also include navigation and military arts. The academic pressure was great, and time passed quickly. The grief brought by his father's death gradually faded away. Geronimo had not dreamed of the white sandy beaches of his hometown for a long time. Now he could walk around this rich and luxurious city with his eyes closed. The countless alleys and side streets were all familiar to him. There was always something new to satisfy his curious eyes here. There were always grand and magnificent celebrations, endless fireworks, and never-ending dramas. It was a treasure box and a kaleidoscope. It was a hub of wealth and information, as well as a breeding ground for greed and sin. The Feast of Corpus Christi was the most grand religious festival in Goa. After nightfall, the passionate citizens carried roses and candles and walked out of their homes to the streets. They sang hymns and paraded around the entire city. The representatives of the city hall led the way, holding velvet flags embroidered with silk and gold threads. Behind them followed the floats made by various guilds in the city. These 2- or 3-story giants were crafted by tanners and gardeners over several months, exquisitely displaying castles, dragons, serpents, and sirens from legends. Some were even large enough to carry a small stage for performances. Geronimo naturally did not want to miss this annual carnival. He slipped out of the student line and mixed into the jubilant and noisy crowd on the street. There were vendors selling snacks on the street, but Geronimo resisted the temptation and turned into a small alley behind the main street. There was the most lively puppet theater in Goa. He never missed any performance. Those magical adventure stories always touched the heartstrings of the boy. He struggled to push his way to the front row and found that the play was already halfway through. Today's story was about the Portuguese prince's conquest of Ceuta. The prince led his army across the Mediterranean to attack this Moorish city in North Africa and spread the gospel of Christ to that dark continent. The heads of those disobedient guys were cut off in an exaggerated way and piled up like a mountain. The rest of the conquered people were enslaved and chained to be loaded onto large sailing ships. The excitement in his eyes gradually faded away. Geronimo lowered his head. He didn't want to watch anymore. He thought of his father. Suddenly, he felt that the crowd around him was suffocating and stuffy. The previously ignored heat and sweat smell came in waves, making it almost impossible for him to breathe. Geronimo hunched his back and backed away. In a hurry, he stepped on someone's shoe. Immediately, someone grabbed him roughly by the back of the neck and said, "Are you blind or what?" He lost his balance and fell out of the crowd, landing on his bottom. Looking up, he recognized several boys who had gathered around him. Some were slightly older than him, and some were his age. They were all students of St. Paul's College. This was not a good thing. Geronimo had never been on good terms with them. The ringleaders were two fair-skinned Portuguese boys, followed by a group of darker-skinned local children, and Tip, a boy from the East African coast like him. "I think he did it on purpose," the taller Portuguese boy said, placing his foot on Geronimo's leg and slowly applying pressure. "Anyway, he never apologizes to us. Everyone take a kick at him." Geronimo gritted his teeth and didn't cry out in pain, but he didn't avoid the other boys' taunting gaze. "Oh, step on him! Step on him!" The boys cheered and took turns kicking him. Geronimo protected his head and face, waiting for an opportunity to pounce and wrap his arms around one boy's leg, flipping him to the ground. He then straddled him and pounded him hard. Amid the boys' cries, Geronimo stood up and pointed angrily at the taller boy who had stepped on him. "Antonio, I stepped on you, so you can step on me back! The others, they have no right to hit me!" Spit! The saliva landed on Geronimo's shirt. It was Tip. Compared to the other local children, he seemed more eager to act as the vanguard against Geronimo. Tip hated this guy with the same skin color as him, and even more so his pretentious pride. Seeing him reminded him of his own skin color and his own poor and backward hometown. To integrate into civilized society, he had to firmly draw a line with Geronimo. "Son of the headless sultan," Tip threw a hard clod of mud at Geronimo. "Son of a traitor." "Shut up!" Geronimo roared and threw him to the ground. The two boys rolled around in the mud. The crowd watching from the back turned their heads to look at them. The other boys jeered and occasionally kicked them. Outnumbered, Geronimo was gradually cornered against the wall, with only enough strength to defend himself. Even so, he refused to show weakness. He had asked himself countless times what he had done wrong and why they always treated him so harshly. But the answer was clear. It was because he had a different face and a different skin color, and he refused to lower his head, just like his father, who would not bow to the Portuguese even if he lost his head. Antonio's leather shoes kicked him in the upper lip, and the fragile skin immediately broke, with salty and bloody tears flowing into the gaps of his tightly clenched teeth. "Ah! Let go!" Antonio cried out in pain. His hair at the back of his head was pulled down. Geronimo took the opportunity to pounce and kick him down, then broke through the crowd that was beating him. Only then did he see the person who had come to his aid, a girl with a big braid. She was wrapped in a dirty red sari and her light brown skin was covered in dust and dirt. She looked like one of the many street children in Goa. Many sailors who came ashore would take local women as mistresses and have children like her. Antonio led the boys to surround them, blocking the girl as well. The girl pulled Geronimo behind her, showing no fear at all. Looking for trouble? You're the one looking for trouble. A boy pushed her, but was immediately lifted by the scruff of his neck by a burly man behind him. The boy dangled in the air, kicking and crying loudly. He was held in the man's rough hand like a chicken. Wanna cry? Go home to your mom! The girl rolled her eyes disdainfully. She gestured to the man, and the crying boy was thrown back to the ground with a hard thud. The girl sneered at the boy as he scrambled and rolled into the midst of his friends. She raised her chin and said, "Who else wants to give it a try?" Several boys looked frightened and pushed each other back, retreating about 10 steps. Suddenly, they all turned and ran away together. Useless, the girl scoffed. She turned to glare at Geronimo, her nose almost touching his face. You too. Geronimo was speechless. He hadn't expected to be rescued by a girl, and even less so to be looked down upon by one. Don't show off next time, she said in a tone as if lecturing a younger brother. Be smarter when you encounter such things. If you still charge ahead when there are many people, you're just a fool. Get back quickly before it's too late. If you're late, you'll have to climb the wall to get back to school. The girl interrupted him, turning and waving her hand as she walked towards the alley entrance. Geronimo followed a few steps and shouted at her retreating figure, "What's your name?" The girl stopped and turned back, giving him a look that said, "No need to tell you." Geronimo felt embarrassed and dejected. He turned to the burly man beside him. "I'm Geronimo. What about you?" He's mute. The girl's voice came from afar. "Let's go, Raj." The man called Raj responded with an "ah" and followed her out of the alley. Geronimo watched their figures disappear completely at the bustling alley entrance. He felt both lucky and humiliated today, and for a moment, he was rather dispirited. It wasn't until the puppet theater began to pack up that he came to his senses. Geronimo looked towards the west at the Mount of Our Lady of the Rosary, and as he gazed at the dimly lit church tower in the night, he couldn't help but sigh. He really had no choice but to climb the wall to get back to school.
Chapter 6, Nun or Wild Child 2.
A month later, I ran into that mysterious girl again. And get this, we both ended up in the exact same situation, standing in the hallway as punishment. Geronimo got busted for fighting in class. What really ticked him off was that the priest only punished him and let Antonio off tangent-free. Grumbling, he dragged his feet out to the corridor, only to find someone already standing there. It was her the girl would helped him that night. She still had that long braid, but now she was dressed in clean, nun-style robes in black and white, with embroidered symbols from St. Monica's Convent and the Royal Hospital. Under the bright light, Geronimo noticed her eyes were a striking gray-green. They both froze for a second, just staring. Finally, Geronimo broke the silence. "Why are you here?" "They think I stole something." "Did you?" She shrugged like it was no big deal. "It wasn't stealing, it was mine to begin with." "You stole," he caught her sharp look and quickly changed his tone. "I mean, what did you take?" "A book." "What book?" Curiosity got the better of him. "Can I see?" She eyed him suspiciously, like she was sizing him up. After a moment, she leaned in. The nuns are gonna search me any minute. Here, take it and hide it somewhere they'd never check. Just then, they heard an old nun's voice echoing down the hall. The girl shoved the book into his hands. Hurry! Geronimo panicked. He couldn't stuff it in his shirt or hide it under a plant fast enough. As the nuns got closer, in a split-second decision, he yanked his waistband open and shoved the book down his pants. "Oh my God," the girl whispered in horror. Two stern-looking nuns marched up to them. Both kids snapped to attention. The head nun got right in the girl's face, her big nose mole almost touching the girl's forehead. "No talking!" The shorter nun chimed in. "Hand it over. Now." When the girl didn't respond, she snapped. "Or no dinner for you today." "I didn't take anything," the girl said defiantly. The two nuns exchanged a look and flanked her. Geronimo wisely took a step back. They patted her down thoroughly, but came up empty. Frustrated, they turned their suspicious glares toward the boy. Geronimo tried to play it cool, but sweat dripped down his back. "Is it on you?" the taller nun demanded, looming over him. She leaned in like she had with the girl, then froze when she spotted his loose waistband and the obvious bulge in his pants. Good heavens! She recoiled like she'd been splashed with curry, grabbed her fellow nun, and scurried away. The two kids stood there, stunned by their sudden victory. After a pause, the girl let out a slow sigh. Geronimo glanced at her nervously. "Are you a nun?" "Of course not," she shot him a look. "I don't want to end up like them. My jerk uncle dumped me here." "Oh, I thought you were. I figured you were... a nobody? An orphan?" She raised an eyebrow. "Pretty much." She glanced around cautiously, then whispered, "Give me the book." Geronimo saw his chance. "What's your name?" She frowned, clearly not wanting to answer. "If you don't tell me, I am not giving it back." "I'll just take it." "You wouldn't dare." He puffed out his chest triumphantly. She backed off, disgusted. Not his finest moment, but it worked. After a standoff, she finally gave in. "Isabel." "I am Geronimo," he beamed. Isabel wasn't impressed. "You already said that. I've got ears." She studied him. "But I think you're lying. That's not your real name," she added. "You don't look like a Geronimo. You're not Portuguese." That hit a nerve. He realized he hadn't used his real name in ages. "Yusuf, my father named me that." He paused. "But the priest won't let me use it anymore. Now everyone calls me Geronimo." "Told you." Geronimo ventured carefully. "You don't like your name?" "Same as you. They gave it to me, but I've got it worse." She scowled. "I forgot my real name. My mom used to call me something, but I can't remember." He didn't push about her mom and changed the subject. "How old are you, Isabel?" 10. "Me too. I am turning 10 next month." "Then you still gotta call me Big Sis." She nudged him. "Now give me the book. You talk too much." He pulled it out and handed it over. Isabel took it, then yelped and dropped it like it was burning. "Ew, it's warm!" "You told me to hurry," he said, exasperated, picking it up off the floor. He squinted at the cover. "What's this written in?" French, but the original was Italian. She carefully took the book back once it cooled down. "The nuns say it's forbidden. Took me forever to get it." Even though he knew he couldn't read it, Geronimo leaned in. "What's it about?" 10 young people hiding from the plague in the countryside. They tell stories, 100 of them. She gently ran her hand over the cover. "It's really fun. I'll lend it to you someday." "I can't read French," he scratched his head. "Latin's already hard enough." "No big deal. I know Tamil and Hindi too, she bragged, rare pride in her voice, and some Arabic, German, and Sinhala. Whoa, that's amazing! Geronimo's jaw dropped. Heck, he still stumbled over Portuguese sometimes. How'd you learn so many languages? Isabel grinned mischievously. Easy. Start with the swear words. Geronimo looked doubtful. But where would you meet that many people to swear at? Seriously? She stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You've never been? Where? Gal, face green the docks near the armory. It's full of convicts from all over the world doing hard labor. Guards patrol there all the time, she winked. Climb over the wall on the north side and walk a bit. If you're brave enough, it'll take you there sometime.
Chapter 7. Heaven or Hell 1.
The sky was dim, and the Rosary Hill was shrouded in the hazy dusk. From behind a broken wall north of the monastery came the soft rustle of footsteps trampling grass. How did you find this place? A boy's voice asked. Had to hide from the nuns. One time, Sister insisted. I joined the choir, said I couldn't go out unless I agreed, the girl replied. Quit staring and give me a boost. The boy sounded worried. Sneaking out like this, are you sure it's okay? Good Lord, do you have to ask every single year? Grumbling, the girl landed nimbly on the other side of the wall. When she straightened up, her face looked thinner, her figure taller, and her features sharper. She tossed her braid and waved to her companion. Hurry up! You've gotten heavier, the boy said as he landed, now looking more like a young man. Standing side by side, he was clearly a head taller. Over the past few years, they'd been racing to grow sometimes, one taller, sometimes the other. But once they turned 14, Geronimo shot up like crazy, leaving Isabel far behind. It was Corpus Christi again. Down in the city, festive floats streamed through the streets. Sea breezes carried songs and laughter, making the mountains feel even quieter. Spending a fortune, dozens of people working overtime for 3 months off for one night. Isabel glanced at the bustling scene below before turning away. Heading down the hill another way. These Portuguese are so weird. She lifted her robe as she walked. My drunk uncle's dirt poor, but acts like nobility, too proud to work. By day, he hires servants to follow him around, watching cockfights or drinking. By night, he sneaks around begging money from rich, distant relatives. All his friends are the same. The wealthy ones are even worse. Those polite gentlemen might have been murdering, burning, and robbing ships yesterday. Those kind, generous widows might have poisoned their husbands for the inheritance. She grew angrier as she spoke, storming ahead. They run casinos, loan sharking anything for money. Then every year they confess and pledge to serve God like they've done nothing wrong. I see it every day. Whenever Isabel ranted like this, Geronimo stayed quiet. Deep down, he felt a little sorry for her. She didn't like the people here, and it seemed like nobody liked her either, but he'd never say that out loud unless he wanted a beating. He wasn't brave enough to pity Isabel. They reached the woods by the riverbank, where moonlight and lantern lights danced on the Mandovi River. Countless merchant ships sailed from these docks into the Arabian Sea, crossing the Indian Ocean, following Africa's coast past Cape Verde, carrying Eastern wealth straight to Lisbon. Are you sure we can sneak in today? Last time we got caught, those guards definitely know us, the boy said, unsure about the plan. One more slip-up, Father Augustine won't let me out again. Isabel was confident. That's why I picked Corpus Christi. Even guards want to have fun. Why are you so set on seeing that pirate? He's a serious criminal. Geronimo was nervous but didn't want to seem cowardly. Even if the guards are distracted, we can't handle him. "They say he knows something about my deadbeat dad," she reassured him, patting his shoulder. His chained up tight, she gestured. "Besides, Raj is with us. Don't worry." Long ago, Geronimo wondered why Raj, a grown man, obeyed a young girl until he learned Isabel had saved his life. Raj was a dark-skinned Dravidian, considered the lowest caste under India's ancient system, but he had skilled hands. She could forge iron and craft delicate gold and silver ornaments. This offended the Vaishya caste, who made their living from traditional crafts. They wrecked Ray's shop, banned him from goldsmithing, and cut out his tongue for talking back. Village elders found him guilty and untouchable, daring to defile sacred craftsmanship. As they were about to burn him, Isabel hid inside a goddess statue, pretending to be a spirit, shouting at them in multiple languages. The elders thought the gods were angry and freed Raj. Since then, the gentle goldsmith became Isabel's loyal follower. Even Geronimo was impressed when he heard the story. They jumped down a slope into the royal hospital. Isabel sometimes helped care for patients here and knew the place well. She led Geronimo to a hidden door that opened onto a path to the docks. The two sneaked past the guards, wading through water, and finally slipped inside the shipyard's fence. The so-called shipyard was a massive military zone built on the remains of an Indian Raja's dock. It had piers, a mint, a cannon foundry, and an arsenal, plus huge docks for warships, a small church, and a prison, their destination. The prison stood behind the church, half underground, connected by a stone passage. Geronimo peeked at the torchlit entrance and the guards on duty, then ducked back behind the wall, frustrated. We made it all this way, and they're not even watching the festivities. What are you mumbling about? Come help. Isabel's voice came from the shadows. He went over and saw her struggling to push several large crates stacked against the wall. He quickly helped, gritting his teeth as they shifted them aside. Here, Isabel wrapped her braid around her neck and crawled through the gap. Inside was a dark shaft. They climbed down a ladder into a small room. By the faint light from above, Geronimo realized they were at the entrance to the waterways under the church. But the path to the main waterway was blocked by a heavy wooden door. He wrestled with the iron lock until his hands hurt, but it wouldn't budge. Let me. Isabel braced her foot against the door, lifted her robe, and pulled out a crowbar strapped to her leg. Under Geronimo's stunned gaze, she expertly pried off the lock and hasp. Behind the door was the waterway leading to the prison, where Raj was already waiting, just as Isabel had instructed. Only Geronimo was surprised. How'd you get here? Raj jingled a keychain on his belt. After leaving his village for Goa, City Hall was hiring sewage cleaners. Neither Portuguese nor high-caste Indians wanted the dirty job, so Isabel helped him get it. No wonder she knew the sewers like the back of her hand. Geronimo remembered how dirty she was when they first met, probably just climbed out of some drain. City Hall says cleanings from 8 to 10. Raj has to return the keys in an hour and a half. Isabel led the way. We gotta hurry. The dungeon was dead silent, completely cut off from the party vibes outside. All you could hear was creepy air, rats scratching around, and the constant drip-drip of water.
Chapter 8. Heaven or Hell 2.
The heavy-duty criminals locked up here weren't even allowed to do hard labor on the riverbanks, just chained in these pitch-black cells year after year, waiting to die. Their bodies were already gone, only their dull yellow eyes still followed the shadows of the three intruders moving through the gloom. Francis Benamy? Isabel stopped at the innermost cell door and whispered toward a dark shape in the hay. No answer. She swallowed, gathered her courage, and raised her voice. Gecko Monk! A low, raspy laugh slithered across the floor like a snake. The shadow shifted. "How old are you?" "I am the one asking questions here," Isabel said, trying to sound firm and steady. "I ask. You answer." Gecko Monk doesn't waste words with people outside the bars. Then silence again. Isabel frowned out of habit. She wasn't in control here. Reluctantly, she handed the crowbar to Raj and stepped back. The big guy let out a deep grunt, and the heavy lock clattered to the ground. "Now it's someone inside the cell asking you," Isabel said, sitting cross-legged in front of him. "I ask. You answer." The shadow squirmed, and a gaunt, scary face emerged from the dark. His sunken eyes fixed first on Raj, then shot a glare at Hieronymo before finally landing on Isabel. He chuckled silently, his cracked lips parting to reveal gums rotten and pitted from scurvy. He looked less like a person and more like some kind of ghost. "Razor-nosed bastard," he said, "I hate your damn green eyes." Isabel snatched the crowbar from Raj and slammed it against the pirate's shoulder. Fighting back anger, she asked in a low voice, "You know him?" "If I had a choice, I'd rather not." Gecko Monk raised his shackled hands toward her. "Look what he gave me." His arms were covered in tattoos of sea monsters and sirens. Isabel looked away in disgust. "Where is he?" "Could be at the bottom of the sea near Madagascar, or in some trench off Somalia." His nasty grin was disgusting. "You'll have to ask the ocean currents." Hieronymo noticed Isabel trembling slightly beside him, but her voice stayed steady. "He's dead?" Gecko Monk burst out laughing. It grew louder, more twisted, more hysterical, like his whole body was about to break apart from the madness. All the half-dead prisoners waiting to rot in their cells seemed to wake at the sound. They rose like zombies, crowding the bars of every cell, bony bird-like hands gripping the iron, joining in with hoarse and shrill laughter. Drool even dripped from their broken, jagged teeth. They tilted their heads, rolling their eyes, staring hard at the three outsiders who'd stumbled into their dark world. "Answer me." Isabel hurled the crowbar at Gecko Monk like she could throw all that terrifying laughter out of her head. The crowbar whistled through the air, cutting a bloody line across Gecko Monk's face, then struck the hard stone wall with a white mark before bouncing into the corner. Gecko Monk stopped laughing. His expression shifted to something like awe and pity. He broke the code. Undertaker Harry doesn't allow betrayal. Then that sick, crazy look returned. Hieronymo almost wondered if two souls were stuffed inside one body. He stole the navigation charts of the three-jewel eunuch and tried to keep the Chinese emperor's treasure all to himself. Ha ha ha. Madman. A total madman. "We gotta go." Hieronymo grabbed the girl's hand to pull her away. He heard the faint sound of a key turning in a lock down the passage guards. They'd been drawn by the prisoners' weird, loud laughter. Raj scooped Isabel onto his shoulder and followed Hieronymo, rushing past bony arms reaching out like rotten branches on both sides of the hall. Two armed guards came down the stone steps into the dungeon, one after another. The earlier noise had vanished into thin air. Only the flickering torchlight and the soft crackle of burning flames remained. Everything seemed normal. They only caught the scent of moving air, but there shouldn't be any wind in this completely sealed underground prison. The guards exchanged a look, fear clear in their eyes. They raised their matchlock guns, aiming at the lifeless bodies in the cells. The first guard noticed the unusually open door at the end of the passage. He approached carefully, gun raised, and peered inside. The notorious pirate Gecko Monk was gone. So was the crowbar that had been lying in the corner. The guard's face went pale. "Prison break! Heavy criminal escaped!" He blew sharp, piercing blasts on the whistle hanging from his chest. Soon, The news would spread throughout Goa, and every guard in the city would be on the hunt.
Chapter 9. Heaven or Hell 3.
Just a wall away, the street was all lit up and smelled fancy, with a cheering crowd pushing flower floats along. Everyone was dressed in over-the-top outfits, guys on fancy horses from Arabia or Persia, saddles decked out in gold and silver, ladies in sedan chairs holding rosaries behind taffeta curtains, with slaves holding huge canopies over them. They moved through the streets, followed by tons of servants, clogging up the whole road. Geronimo and Isabel were leaning against the wall, gasping for air, weird shadows and light flickering on their faces. Police whistles had brought guards. Running, they'd barely made it out of the sewer. Luckily, Raj drew most of them away so they could escape. If they do a citywide search, we're totally screwed. Geronimo slid down the wall, out of breath. We gotta get back. I still want to go to the library. Isabel hesitated. That guy mentioned Admiral Zheng He's navigation charts. She suddenly cut off, a gasp stuck in her throat. A hand reached out from the dark behind her, tilting her chin up, while another pressed a cold metal blade against her neck. Isabel held her breath. Glancing back, all she saw was damp, curly hair. She heard the clink of iron chains. Gecko Monk had escaped and followed the kids here. You. Geronimo pushed off the wall to lunge at him, but got kicked hard in the chest and slammed back against the wall. The boy curled up in pain, then struggled to his feet. Let her go. Relax, little knight, he said mockingly. Gecko Monk doesn't kill kids most of the time. He dragged the girl slowly into the light. Now, Geronimo could see he was wearing some weird, stolen formal wear and a velvet hat with feathers. Gecko Monk just wants his little friends to help him with a few small problems, he said, amused by the nervous boy. And a free piece of advice: stay out of pirates' secrets. He let Isabel go, gave her a gentle push back toward her friend, then tipped his hat like a gentleman, raised his hands, and melted back into the shadows like he was never there. Before the two could catch their breath, guards chasing Gecko Monk shouted, "They're here!" If they got caught, it was over. They didn't stop to breathe, just bolted into the moving crowd. With guards yelling behind them, Geronimo and Isabel, using the packed crowd to block their pursuers. They ducked under moving sedan chairs, hid behind silk curtains, and scared the heck out of a naked couple having fun, and they're both kids backed out blushing and screaming, almost grabbed by soldiers, then pushed further ahead. They accidentally knocked over a fat noblewoman in crazy high heels, and a bunch of servants rushed to help, clogging the already jam-packed street. The guards got stuck in the chaos, could only watch helplessly as the two ran off. Geronimo climbed onto a moving float and pulled Isabel up. They made it to the top and looked back at the frustrated guards. Finally could breathe a little. Their float was themed around St. Catherine's martyrdom, with a 2-level stage below acting out her miracles and torture. Geronimo watched for a bit, then noticed how quiet Isabel was. He turned, sat next to her, hesitated, then put an arm around her shoulder and patted gently. "Don't cry, Isabel, don't cry." He didn't really get her complicated feelings about her dad. She mocked him, blamed him, even cursed him always with disgust when he came up. But all these years, Shed quietly collected his notes, asked everyone about his whereabouts. Maybe deep down, she still hoped to find this father Shed never met, to ask him why he abandoned them, why he never sent word. But today she finally knew. That last bit of hope was gone. Dad was never coming back. Shed never find him. "Don't cry, Isabel," he said clumsily. Not sure what else to say. It was the first time He'd seen her cry. Suddenly, the float started shaking, gears grinding inside. Both kids froze, scared. Isabel stopped crying, looked at the confused boy. He didn't know what was happening either. On stage, the show hit its peak, actors singing hymns, the crowd joining in. Then machinery kicked in. The third level they were on slowly rotated. The leather and wood platform opened like petals. Two little angel statues holding trumpets rose from below. The trumpets shot out fireworks, bright trails symbolizing the saint's soul rising. Fireworks boomed. The colorful street cheered. Gorgeous fireworks burst over the kids' heads, stunningly beautiful, but gone in a blink. Isabel finally smiled through tears. With the fireworks roaring, they couldn't hear each other. She covered her ears and yelled at the crowd below. No more crying, never again, screw all of them. Goa, this man-made heaven, its dazzling night even outshone the stars and moon. Under that same moon and stars, far away, the British Empire was quietly rising. Dutch armed ships sailed into the Indian Ocean, starting to challenge Portugal's sea power. A report from India sat on the Pope's lap in the Vatican. It said devout missionaries refused to be sent to Goa. They thought the place was morally rotten, beyond saving even if God himself showed up. Under the lavish fireworks, the sickly city still glowed with wasteful brilliance. Everyone could smell the decay beneath the luxury, but no one cared. No one condemned fraud or robbery. Poverty was shameful, dignity worthless. Only wealth and power were worth chasing and praising.
Chapter 10. Yusuf or Geronimo I.
Father Augustine finally brought out the cane. The boy got 2 smacks on his palm, stinging so bad he was gritting his teeth. But this time, the mess was just too big. Even the father couldn't cover for him. He had to make an example out of him in front of everyone. Geronimo totally got it. He figured if there really was a hell like the books say, then most of the priests except Augustine ought to be thrown right into it, boiling oil and all. For the 7 years had been staying in Goa. Father Augustine from the Santa Casa da Misericordia had been looking after him. The pious, kinda nerdy old man was from Granada in Spain and had studied theology at the University of Paris. Exactly because he was a bookworm who couldn't play the political game, the good postings with all the perks never came his way. That's why the higher-ups sent him off to deal with a troublemaker like Geronimo. Acting up at a time like this, the father slammed the table so hard his pince-nez and little skullcap jumped, showing off his tonsured bald spot. Do you even know you're getting crowned next month? Geronimo scratched his neck, confused. Before it finally clicked, his eyes went wide, head totally forgotten. He was about to inherit the title of Sultan. The father spoke gravely. After the coronation, the viceroy will send a fleet to take you back home. We hope you'll spread the gospel there. Oh, and he cleared his throat. He also asked the nuns at St. Monica's to pick a pure young woman to be your fiancée. Before Geronimo could even object, a wooden door beside the father swung open. A girl with a thick braid was shoved into the room by a pair of hands. Isabel. She turned and saw Geronimo standing there frozen. "Huh," they said in unison. "No way!" The 2 kids glared daggers at each other. What'd want to marry this jerk? Silence. The father's little cap practically flew off his head. No shouting in the house of God. After that, things were pretty awkward between them. They gave each other the silent treatment for a good while. On Coronation Day, people came from all over to see the spectacle in Goa. The Viceroy's docks were packed with ships, and the streets were so crowded you could barely see the cobblestones. There was music, drums, flowers thrown everywhere. The viceroy and all the big shots were in place, taking turns giving long, boring speeches. Geronimo checked himself out in the floor-length mirror fancy undershirt, white breeches, a heavy brocade cape trimmed in gold and silver thread, and those expensive silk stockings. Oh, and that ridiculously over-the-top crown. Had never worn anything that heavy on his head. Felt like if he tilted too far, head topple right over. Look at Hema monkey in man's clothes. A bunch of boys burst out laughing. And Antonio and his little crew made faces at Geronimo. The headless sultan's brat is going back to Monkeyland to be king. Bet in a couple years, hell be times hic asterisk. Tip made a gagging noise, stuck out his tongue, and drew a finger across his throat. Before he could lower his hand, something gold and heavy smacked him right in the face. Tip fell on his butt, clutching his face, swallowing a yelp. The heavy crown rolled in the dirt, making the other boys back off. They'd always been scared of how fierce Geronimo was in a fight. Geronimo glared. Who's next? I'll get him. Tip spat out a broken tooth, scrambled up, and grabbed Geronimo's robe. The other boys piled on. Stockings torn, white breeches scuffed, shirt pulled half off, but Geronimo didn't care. All he wanted was to punch those stupid faces till they cried for their moms. Servants and nuns rushed over and pulled them apart. He couldn't tell who was yelling at him, didn't matter. They were all saying the same thing. Geronimo, causing trouble again. It was always like this. Every single time. It was always Geronimo's fault, no exceptions. All cause his dad was that beheaded sultan who rebelled. All cause the warriors back home only had spears and bows. He picked the crown out of the dirt and put it back on, straightened his collar himself. Ignoring the nuns' nagging and the servants' dirty looks, he pushed the door open and stepped out into the bright Sunday. Cheers and trumpet blasts rose up just for him.